Hello. I had no idea that people were actually watching my knitting videos. And I'm a Gemini. I have a lot of hobbies. I get really busy and I lost touch. And then one day I was on YouTube and I saw my Kristen Knits channel and I saw how many views some of the instructional videos had, or at least one, and the comments a couple people had made, which I really appreciate, that it was actually nice and fun for them. Sometimes I think I'm the only one who likes this sort of thing, so it was really nice to see that I'm not. And I pulled out my camera and I tried to set things up, and one of my lights, the bulb is gone. I dropped it, so this probably isn't going to look that great, but I figure at least it's something. So I'm going to let you know what I'm doing here, and we'll just knit, and you can knit with me while I yammer on. So this is socks, 2 at a time, toe up. I started these at a friend's house, making them for somebody who would like the crazy colors. They're great colors. I did at one point have to cut the yarn because the colors were getting a little too, boy, it's dark. The colors were getting, they were a little too different. One was very green, one was very autumnal, with all the oranges. So I decided to split the yarn and switch. What I do is I take one cake of yarn and I pull from the center on one end and I pull from the outside on another. It can get a little bit cumbersome when you're in a lap or traveling. Sometimes I will put it in a big Ziploc baggie and I will zip the top of the baggie across the top with 2 little holes at the end for the yarn to come out on either side, and that does help to keep it all separated and not get too twisted up and crazy. Otherwise, it's just a really fun gymnastics game, and you get to remember some geometry. There are apps that my son plays where he can use lines to manipulate things, and I'd like to think that it's an educational process, so you can do whatever you'd like to do. But I'm going to knit these. I'm almost to the point where I could start making a gusset, and somebody had left a comment wanting to know how to do a gusset on toe-up socks 2 at a time. The way that I do it, and if I make a video that shows when I start there, I think I want to go about another ½ an inch before I do that, is I'll make increases on either side of the sole part of the sock. Here I have a 2x1 rib on the top part of the sock. On the sole it's just plain because nobody wants to walk on ribbing, at least I don't. And on either side I will go in 1 stitch here. Boy, I don't even know how close I can get with this camera. It's been a while since I used this camera. It likes to move around. So I use 1 stitch here, and then I will put the increase in the middle, and I try to make it leaning to the right way of the sock, and then I'll do another one at the other end, knit a row, and keep increasing until I have double the amount of stitches on the sole as I began, or as I started with. And then I will do decreases, a little heel turn, and there are websites that I always have to reference because I haven't made socks in a while, and I already had it on my head to bookmark the page that I typically use as a reference, and when I get to that point I will include it for you. So today is November 1st, and I don't know how many of you out there are writers, but it is the beginning of National Novel Writing Month. I'm going to start knitting here, and I hope you can see it's really nice and relaxing, and I'm sad I haven't been doing it much because I'm so busy. This month is especially busy because, as I was saying, it's National Novel Writing Month. For short, we call it NaNoWriMo. And I cannot recall anything I have mentioned in my previous videos, but I wrote a book called Knitwitch, a Stitches Cast series, and it is on Amazon. It's a paperback. I wrote it for NaNoWriMo 2 years in a row. I did the first 50,000 words one year. I was taking care of my son, and when he was a little one, I would nurse him in the middle of the night and work on the book for 1 month. You have 1 month of November to write 50,000 words. And then the second year, I wrote another 50,000 words to add to it. And then one summer month in June or July, I went through all the words and added some more. And then decided, okay, this is great, I'm done. I have been a writer since I was about 12, and I always wrote short stories. And National Novel Writing Month is perfect for somebody who wants to write something more because it focuses a lot on the quantity of words. The idea is to just get it out, and it really works because you're just so focused on getting all the words out, which means you're getting all the story out. And when you sit there and focus and concentrate on getting the story right, you don't really get the story out because you're just stymied. What if it doesn't sound good enough? What if this isn't the way I want it to go? I better plot ahead and figure it out. And that's not how first drafts work, at least for this person who's only written the one book on Amazon. I have written others with NaNoWriMo, but those are in my own personal stash. They have not been shared. Maybe someday I'll work on them. But this National Novel Writing Month, NaNoWriMo, I am going to write the second Knitwitch book. So I figure while I am here knitting and you are watching and maybe being mesmerized or hypnotized, or I'm being analyzed, because I think I knit a little different than most people. I'll tell you what Knitwitch was about. So I was going through a phase. I really would read a lot of books. I still like reading. I just haven't been able to focus on any fiction books lately. I've really been, for some reason, into I gotta remember this is a rib pattern here. So I've really been into nonfiction books, and I feel like it's because, I don't know, like I have one foot still in the real world or something, and I've been a little bit focused on the stresses of my life, which really means I should probably read more fiction books just to get away for a minute. I should probably also knit more. So I was reading a lot of books about witches and supernatural stuff, and I like those books because you just, especially when I was raising my little kiddo, I could put the book down and deal with things, and I wouldn't have to reread too many pages to know what's going on, which is something I have to do when I read things that are more quote-unquote literary. And then I also found some knitting mystery books, and I wish I could remember the names of them. I think one was called Dyed in the Wool, D-Y-E-D, and I just got into reading those sorts of books, and they were so fun, and I thought, man, I would love it if these two books could be merged. And somebody out there, some great, amazing writer, has a cool line. I want to say it was Fitzgerald or Samuel Beckett or somebody, and they said, if you want to read a good book, write one. So I decided one NaNoWriMo that I was going to write a book about witches who knit. And I came up with the character Addison Thompson, who I based on me, because I know me, and it seemed easy to do. And she grew up in foster homes, and she hit the road upon her high school graduation, and had to make a bathroom break in a little town called Brookwick. And she gets to Brookwick and discovers while there that she is running out of cash, and she's going to have to find some sort of odd job if she wants to continue driving and just figuring out where she's going. At this point, she'd been on the road for 2 years. So when she gets there, she's walking around the Brookwick Town Square, which is really cute because I wanted my town to be very cute, like Stars Hollow of the Gilmore Girls. And she sees a yarn store, and she's a little bit flummoxed and confused by this yarn store because she has no idea why people would need a store full of string. And she's looking in the window and just doing her thing. While she's looking in the window, an owner of the shop sees her. The shop is called A Stitch is Cast. And the woman who's looking at her from the other side of the window is a little bit really surprised and stunned because the owners of the shop and the friend of the owners are witches. And when they see Addison looking in, she recognizes that Addison is a knit witch. And knit witches are very rare witches. They are like the way these sorts of witches are to us, where you have a wand or you flick your finger and you can move your furniture out of the way. That's what knit witches are to witches. They could be legend, but people don't even think they really exist because nobody's ever met them. But she recognizes right away that Addison is a knit witch, and she also recognizes right away that if they don't help Addison, her and the other owner of the store, Deirdre and Elva, if they don't help Addison, Addison is going to die. So she doesn't understand what to do yet because Addison disappears. But as Addison is leaving Brookwick, I think I remember it right. I wrote it, but it's a detail. She remembers the sign in the yarn shop window that says help is wanted, and when you take the job there is also a little apartment above the shop for the clerk to live in. So Addison makes a U-turn, she goes in the shop, she has an interview, and she finds herself a new home in Brookwick. At the same time in the story, there's a mystery about a missing girl, the girl who used to have Addison's apartment, and they're worried about her and don't know where she is. And some of her story comes through. She has been kidnapped and is trapped, and it goes hand in hand with Addison's story, who Deirdre and Elva have to somehow find a way to break it to her that not only are witches real, but she is a witch, and a very rare witch, and nobody knows what to do with her because nobody knows how Knitwitches work. But a lot of crazy things start happening because now that Addison is around yarn and yarn stores and witches, a lot of her powers are coming to life. And I liked the story. I thought it was fun, and it's pretty cool to write about. The short stories that I would write were pretty kind of heavy, female-oriented literary things, and I really liked that I could write a whole book about knitting, and my favorite parts of writing it were writing about when Addison first picks up needles and what it feels like to have a stitch fall off the needle and pull yarn up through that stitch and see something new form, and that she's creating things out of string. And I did do one book reading at a yarn store in Massachusetts, and I read that part where she really kind of starts understanding the stitches and how they fall and play with each other. And it's my favorite part to read out loud. It's just at the beginning, and it's about knitting, and I think anybody who does knit, there's so much satisfaction in getting those stitches to fall off. And I do remember the description of like Elizabeth Zimmermann's diagrams of how knitting works. And Elizabeth Zimmermann writes about knitting like poetry, you know. And if you haven't read her books, which they're instructional books and they're pattern books, but she writes about knitting like she's writing a story, and I adore them. The first one I got is called Knitting Without Tears, and I highly recommend anybody get it, even if you're not new to knitting. But if you are, for sure, I think it starts you off on the right foot. She makes you be more creative and less stick to the rules, you know. She shows you that there's a lot of room for invention when you're knitting, and she has such good imagery about it, you know. So yeah, her description of how stitches fall off and how stitches can be like a little person on this little bridge, this stitch here, and when you put your needle through and you pull more yarn up, that stitch gets a little break, does a little back bend, and just relaxes behind it, and now it's covering it up. And I always thought that was pretty cool. So I was gonna knit some more. So I'm excited about this NaNoWriMo month. I have no idea. I did already write 35,000 words of the second book, but I'm gonna scrap them all because I haven't worked on it in so long, and I want it to be fresh, and I want it to be the way I want it to be now, not the way I, tried to plot it out and plan it before. I don't know if that's ever really going to work for me, at least not when I am doing so many other things. I should probably learn to focus. But I am going to use a little tool. I have gotten into looking at tarot cards. I think they're very cool. They're very pretty. I just love the whole idea of them. So I got some fabulous tarot cards called Everyday Witch Tarot, and the illustrations on these cards are fantastic. All the witches wear these striped tights. Some of them wear striped tights. They got boots. They got snarky faces. They smirk. They do yoga. They drink martinis. They're cupcakes. I haven't looked through them all carefully to see if there's any that are knitting, but they wear witches' hats, and I just adore them. I thought they were fabulous. So I'm going to use these cards as my inspiration, and I will pull out a few and say, okay, what's going to happen? What's going to happen to these characters in this scene? What characters are going to be in this scene? And it really will help me when I get stuck. I can look at the pictures in the tarot cards, and I can use them for setting ideas and, yeah, anything like that. So I'm excited to do that, and I'm excited to write about the knitting stuff again because it is really cool. I recently did start taking my knitting out with me again. I I like to go to craft breweries and get a pint or two, and I get a little chuckle when I pull out my socks for a minute and knit some, or when I'm waiting somewhere and I can just start knitting again. And it really is a good alternative to using my phone. And you know, I have nothing against anybody using the phone. I love my phone. I love everything I can do on it. I like the games. I like the social media. I like the communication. I like the distraction. I like Instagram. I like all the things, you know. And but it does hurt my eyes, and I'm very aware that my head is down. I'm very aware that I'm not creating anything when I'm doing that, although I do hope that I'm making connections with people when I'm doing that. So taking out knitting is kind of nice because I'm already on my phone enough, and at least this way I can get closer and closer to finishing a pair of socks, right? And socks are easy to just stick in a bag. Granted, my bag is like the size of a suitcase. So if you're interested in reading Knitwitch, you can get it on a Kindle for 99 cents. You could also get the paperback version. It is written without an editor, but the story is fun. I've been so flattered when people on Ravelry write to me and tell me how much they enjoyed it and ask me when the second one is coming out. I try not to have guilt feelings that the second one has not come out. My mother's great because she liked the story too, but she was like, you could have worked on it a little longer. It could have been better, and she's absolutely right, of course, but it was not the space that I was in, and I just wanted it to be done, so it's self-published. The paperback is like $11.95, I think, on Amazon. And it's just a fun story about witches who knit. And it kind of ends on a little bit of a cliffhanger. Again, I really liked it when a friend of mine wrote to me and said, no, I can't believe it ended like that. But that's how they're supposed to end. And I am going to write the second one. I haven't decided what to call it. Knitwitch 2 is how it's been so far, but I'm thinking about things like slip, slip, stitch, or slip, slip, spell, or, you know, some kind of play on knitting words. I have thought about throwing a pattern in there, but now that I am learning more about tarot, I think it'd be cool to put some more tarot information on there, especially as I'm going through the first draft with the Everyday Witch tarot cards. It's going to be exciting. Lots of things, always lots of things, too many things. I do too many things, but it keeps me busy. And again, I think it's because I'm a Gemini. I tend to get, I don't want to say I get bored. I guess I get distracted. No, bored is right. I do get bored. I'll do something for a while, and then if I take a break from it for too long, I don't need to pick it up again for a long while, because I just find something else to pique my interest. And that word peak is something I did wrong in my Knitwitch book that I was kind of embarrassed about. I spelled peak, P-E-A-K, and I knew it was P-I-Q-U-E. But you're writing so fast and you're typing so fast, and you have your sister as your editor and your friends as your editors, and then you're just getting impatient. You're like, no more editing. I just want to get it out there and be done. I want to move on to something else now. So it was in there as P-E-A-K. And somebody, I love people like this, wrote to me and said, did you know that on page 200, blah, blah, blah? And I was like, you're awesome. That's I will notice it, but I would never write the author about it. And now I know that it could be appreciated, although it really was a bit of a pain to get it fixed. And I'm sure that there's so much more that is like that. We won't catch everything. So, excuse me. So, as I'm knitting this, I usually will start increasing for the gusset about 2.5 inches, 2 to 2.5 inches from where I want the heel turn to be, the very tip of the heel of the foot. The really fabulous thing about knitting socks like this, 2 at a time, toe up, is you can keep trying them on and see where they're fitting. You can use all the yarn to the very end up to the cuff. Everything will be even, stitch by stitch, line by line, or row by row. That's what I wanted to say originally. and really, you just can't mess it up. Now, the thing about my socks knit 2 at a time, toe up, is the way that I cast on typically when you're doing 2 socks at a time, you will have one here and one here.